So before we get started, there's some things I want to discuss here. The most important thing you should know here is that replicating this training will likely lead to a different race result. In most cases, trying to run the same paces and mileage that I did will lead to either overtraining or undertraining. So instead, I encourage you to look at how the training is structured and adjust the volume and paces to fit your needs. You may even need to structure the training differently to fit your needs, but I'm just sharing mine because this seemed to work really well for me, so maybe there are things you can learn from it. There are also several other factors that went into this race result besides the running. Some of those include eating right, sleeping right, being very diligent with all the ancillary training, getting perfect race conditions, meaning perfect weather and perfect competition. So in this video, I'm going to discuss the times that I hit for everything and the volume that I hit each week. And if you'd like to know more about how and why I set things up, you can always go back and watch my first video of this series, which was me planning out my 10 weeks of training leading to the Houston Half Marathon. Just to briefly recap the structure of most weeks first though, the main focus of each week was the long run at the end of the week, as well as a lactate threshold workout or VO2 max workout at the beginning of each week. I also sprinkled in some easy speed workouts, some hill sprints, and some moderate paced runs. So let's get started now. I'm going to split this into two 5-week periods. The main objective of this first 5-week period was to build up close to my max volume for the entire 10-week cycle. So I wanted to build mileage through the first 4 weeks, from 50 miles the first week to 60 miles to 70 miles to 90 miles, and then I would bring it back down a little bit to 75 miles because I would end this 5-week period with a 5K race on the track. I had also planned for a day off on each of the first 3 weeks just to completely recover and get ready for the next week while I'm building volume. I also want to talk about how I progressed through my early week workout in these first few weeks. My first workout of week 1, I just did a moderate paced run. Week 2, I did lactate threshold repeats. Week 3, I did a lactate threshold run. And week 4, I did VO2 max intervals. So in those first 4 weeks, that first workout progressed in intensity and difficulty. After that, I just kind of cycled through lactate threshold repeats and runs and VO2 max intervals just to make sure I'm touching on all bases. So there's nothing too exciting in week 1. It was mostly just easy and moderate mileage. Wednesday was my first effort over an easy run, and I did 9 miles at a moderate pace, and that happened to be 5:59. When I talk about this moderate pace, it's a pace that I estimate to be roughly 40 seconds slower than lactate threshold pace. It's also worth noting that I do all of this moderate paced running by feel. I don't have a GPS, so I don't constantly check my pace during my run. On Friday, I did my first session of hill work. My hill work sessions never changed throughout this entire training cycle, and what they would consist of was 6 times 50 meters high knees, 6 times 50 meters bounding, and 4 times 100 meter sprint, all uphill, all pretty much full recovery. The only thing that ever changed would just be the mileage before and after, and I would just adjust that to fit my weekly mileage goal. To finish off the week, I started off with a very conservative long run volume of 12 miles. I actually ran a pretty normal pace for the first 6 miles of the run, and then most of the second half of the run was around a moderate pace of 6 flat. So overall, I averaged 6:12 for that run. I should also say that you can assume most of this training is on flat ground unless I tell you otherwise. In the second week, what I would consider to be my first real workout was on Tuesday. I did some lactate threshold repeats, 5 times 1 mile with 1:15 jog rest, and I averaged 5:17 per mile. I did this workout completely by effort as well, and it was well under control, and I was really happy to start out with an average that quick. On Thursday, I had my first easy speed workout. I was doing 8 times 200 meters in a flat grassy area. The stretch that I was running on wasn't exactly 200 meters, but it was pretty close. So I was just making sure to run close to 33-second 200 meter effort. Then on Friday, I did another moderate paced long run, and this time I ran 14 miles at a 6:06 per mile average. I had planned on a day off on Sunday, but one of my friends talked me into a run, and I'm not very hard to convince to go for a run. So I did that, and it wasn't a big deal. I ended up 10 miles over my goal mileage. Week 3 consisted of what I would consider to be my first little hiccup in training. For the 5-mile lactate threshold workout on Tuesday, I averaged 5:26 per mile, but that felt above a lactate threshold effort. For the first 3 miles, I was averaging around low 5:20s, And then miles 4 and 5, I ran around 5:30, and they felt really difficult. I went out a little too fast, and I got a little caught up in what my watch was saying each mile. So I was working really hard to try to maintain that over the last 2 miles, but I couldn't even do that. I think the cause for that was not doing a very good job with my hydration and my nutrition for the few days before that. I ended up really tired from that, so I just ended up resting on Wednesday since I didn't rest the week before anyways, so it wasn't that big of a deal. So on Thursday, I was right back at it with my next easy speed workout, this time 8 times 300. I did these around 1500 meter race effort because I just had to adjust the time to be a little slower because I was doing these on a chat surface track. Saturday was my last moderate pace long run of this first 5 weeks, and it went really well because I averaged 6:05 for 15 miles on a very hilly route. So in week 4, I wanted to get a good VO2 max stimulus now before my 5K race in the next week. I was pretty positive that I was in pretty close to 15 flat 5K shape, so I just did 8 times 1000 at that pace. I tried to hit 3 flat, no faster, no slower, and that went really well. I did my second hill work session on Thursday, followed by a 12-mile moderate run on Friday, since I wouldn't be doing a full-on long run at a moderate pace this week. And then on Saturday, I did my longest run of 16 miles in this first 5 weeks, and to scale back the difficulty a little bit, I just made the pace easier. So in week 5 now, for the lactate threshold run, I made sure not to make the same mistake as I did 2 weeks ago. This time running 6 miles, I didn't even check my watch until I finished. I still split my watch at each mile just for record keeping purposes, but I didn't want to look at my watch and see a time that I thought was a little too slow and feel like I need to speed up. This turned out to be my most consistent lactate threshold run of the cycle without even looking at my watch. I hovered right at or above 5:30 pace on the first 5 miles, and then I ran 5:24 for the last mile. I would say this run was slightly easier than lactate threshold effort because I wanted to make sure I wanted to feel good for Saturday's race. On Thursday, I ran another easy speed workout, and I reverted back from 300 meters to 200 meters just to keep it at an easier effort before the race on Saturday. This time I was actually on a track, and I averaged 32.9 for those when the goal was 33. So finally on Saturday, I ran an indoor 5K on a 300 meter track, and I ran an official PR of 14:56. That was a good validation of the pace that I used for my VO2 max workout in the previous week, and would also help me structure my training going forward. I was really tired the next day, so I dropped my long run down in pace and intensity, and I just ran 14 miles right around 7-minute pace. So at this point, halfway through my 10-week training cycle to Houston, I was very happy because I basically just ran a 5K PR off of not very difficult training and very standard basic training. So I was confident that when I amp up the training in the next few weeks that I was going to get really fit. So in the second half of my training, my goal with the weekly mileage was to progress for 3 more weeks before I taper the last 2 weeks. I didn't have days off planned for weeks 6 or 7, but I did have one planned at the end of week 8. So if you take that day off into account, week 8 was really my highest mileage week and my most dense training week. So my biggest hiccup in this entire cycle started in week 6. I started to get a little bit sick on Monday, but I still managed a couple runs. And then Tuesday, I was running a fever and I was still sick and had some other problems. And I definitely could not run that day, so I just had to take a rest day. Initially, I had planned on one of my most important and most specific workouts being on this Tuesday, which was gonna be 4 times 2 miles at a lactate threshold effort. So I just had to figure out how to shift things around a little bit. Fortunately, I recovered very quickly and I was able to get in a couple runs on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, I told myself I was gonna keep everything at an easy effort, but I just started getting really antsy on my morning run, and that turned into a moderate paced run. After that, I knew I was ready to train at full speed again. So on Friday, I did a hill session, and then Saturday, I did a moderate pace long run at 5:58 pace for 16 miles. Even though I was lacking on my goal mileage for the week because of that sickness, I didn't try to make that all up on the last day on Sunday, so I just did a 6-mile easy run and carried on as normal. So in week 7, the training started to go really well. This Tuesday was supposed to be a VO2 max workout of 15 times 600 meters at 5K pace, but I decided just to completely scrap that workout, and I would shift the previous week's workout 4 times 2 miles up to this Tuesday. I did these 2-mile repeats on a very hilly stretch back and forth, and I averaged 10:42, which was a very nice surprise for me. On Thursday, I started to get a little antsy again, and one of my easy runs turned into a more moderate run on a very hilly route again. On Friday, I was back to another easy speed workout and back up to 300 meters this time. Again, running about 1500 meter race pace. I averaged just above 49 seconds for those. Saturday's moderate paced long run is kind of a funny story. I'd planned a route where I'd go 8 miles out and just come back the same way, so I'd end up at 16 miles. However, I missed one of my turns very early in the route, and so I had no idea where I was, and I was kind of lost. So I ended up just running out based on time and trying to guess where I would hit 8 miles. So I ran out for 51 minutes and then went back the same way. I made the return trip in 50 minutes, so my overall run was an hour and 41 minutes. After mapping it out, I found out that I ran out for 8.5 miles and came back the same way, obviously, so I ended up at 17 miles for the run. And that was at a pretty good clip for another very hilly route. You'll also see that for much of my supplementary mileage around this time, I write NT or not timed. I like doing that a lot during difficult training because you have no desire to push the pace whatsoever. I would go out on a route that I mapped out and I wouldn't start my watch and I'd just run around at a comfortable pace. This really helped me to keep putting the good volume in while staying completely comfortable and being able to focus on my quality workouts. So the idea for week 8 was to hit the volume really hard through 5 days so that I could relax on Saturday and especially on Sunday with a day off, so then I could really super compensate from all the hard work over the past few weeks. Even though I only averaged 5:29 per mile for 6 miles on my lactate threshold run on Tuesday, that run was worth a lot more. I still ran off of effort for that workout and it was very successful, but the weather was absolutely awful. There was a wind chill of about -5 degrees Fahrenheit, it was snowing and I was running on snow-covered roads, and it was a very hilly route. That's when I started to realize that I was getting into very, very good shape. Friday was my biggest and most important long run of the entire training cycle. I picked a very hilly 6-mile loop that I ran 3 times, and I attacked one of the individual miles on each loop, and that was mile 4, 10, and 16. That mile was very flat, but the rest of it was hilly. So I wanted to run a moderate effort for the entire run, except for those 3 hard miles. I averaged somewhere around 550 per mile for the 15 moderate miles, and I ran about 516 or 17 on each of the 3 hard miles. That put me at an overall average of 544 for 18 miles. After that one, I was definitely ready to rest up for the weekend, so that's what I did. In week 9, I ran my second and last VO2 max workout. This time I did 6 times 1200 meters. Given the way that my training was going, I projected my fitness to be a little bit better than it was 3 weeks ago when I ran that 5K. So I was running these 1200 meter repeats at a 5K pace of 1447, which put me right around 333 per 1200. After that, I was done with what I would consider to be any really hard work, but I still wanted to touch on a little bit of everything. So I'd touch on some hill work, some moderate pace running, the long run, some lactate threshold work, and some easy speed. So I followed up that VO2 max workout with some hill work on Thursday and a moderate 11 miler on Friday, in which I just wanted to average just under 6 flat per mile. For Saturday's 14-mile long run, I just wanted to keep that at a pretty easy effort. I got a little bit nervous when I finished that run and realized that I just averaged 611 per mile, but I checked my heart rate right as I finished that run and it was below 140 beats per minute. Because of that, I was pretty confident that I was just in that good of shape and I didn't really overcook myself on that run. So in my final week of training before the half marathon, on Tuesday I did some lactate threshold repeats on the track, 6 times 1600 meters with 1 minute rest. I got a fair amount of criticism for this workout because people didn't think I should be doing that much volume that close to the race. But I still took that into account because I scaled back my true lactate threshold pace about 5 or 6 seconds. So I made sure I was not working too hard on that Tuesday. So things got a little bit interesting on Thursday and Friday before I flew to Houston, and we got some ice back home. That made it very risky to run on any type of hard surface because they were really, really slick, and I didn't want to take any chances with falling down and hurting my knee or something. So for those couple days, I basically just ran laps around my parents' property on the icy grass. For my easy speed workout, I just picked a stretch on the grass that would take me about 40 seconds to run. I was completely focused on running with a good rhythm and in complete control. So then I just did a couple more easy runs after that light workout, and I was fortunate enough to get great conditions on Sunday, so I tried to take full advantage of that, and I don't know how, but I ran under 67 minutes for my first half marathon. So that covers all of the running portion of my training. For my ancillary work, the biggest thing for me was doing a strength training routine that would take me about 35 minutes or so, and I would do that twice a week. I would almost always do that after my 2 hardest sessions of the week. So my first one was usually after my Tuesday workout, and my second one was usually after my moderate paced long run or maybe some other light workout at the end of the week. In the 10th week, as part of my taper, I only did the strength routine once after my Tuesday workout. I do plan on making a completely separate video to show you what that strength routine is, so stay tuned for that. On other days in the week, I would always do some hurdle hip mobility drills before my hard sessions of the week, so that it was usually on a Monday or the day before my long run. And on easier recovery type days, I would do the Myrtle hip strengthening routine, which you can also find a video for on my channel. One more thing of note that I think is really important about this training, and that is that I did almost all of this training completely on my own. The only time that I would run with anybody at all would be for the occasional easy run, but I did all of my workouts and all of my long runs by myself. So if you only analyze the numbers in all of this training without knowing all of the external factors, I don't think this indicates anywhere near a sub 67 half marathon. I like to do a lot of things in my training that increase the perceived effort at any given pace, so that when you get to the race day, it's like you're a completely new person and you can run way faster. So I think that was everything that I want to say, which means that this half marathon series is finally concluding. So thank you for following along on this journey, and thank you for the support. I hope I've been able to help you all out in some way along the way. I'm very excited to share my next goal with you eventually, but until then, I'll catch you next time.